reader in mineralogy and petrology, and what that means is that I study the makeup of rocks and minerals around the Earth's crust. And my rationale for doing that is that I'm interested in understanding how magmas form in the Earth's crust and what happens beneath volcanoes. And metals are actually being formed today under volcanoes. And what we're looking for are ancient volcanoes which are since extinct, and we're looking for the presence of metals and other forms of deposit beneath them. Right from an early age, I knew I wanted to be a scientist. And actually I was reasonably good at biology, but I was much better at maths, chemistry and physics. And that's the training which really got me into earth sciences. It's a very broad but very physical based science. And I think, like a lot of people at school, the thing that really hooked me was a really good chemistry teacher. And I became interested in the chemical makeup of the earth, the chemical makeup of minerals. And so I became an avid mineral collector, and as you can see, I haven't actually grown out of that yet. So it was collecting minerals, being interested in what they were made of, and having a really good and enthusiastic teacher were the things that got me into this type of science. I have to be honest and say that it was when I went to university that I first decided wholeheartedly to do earth sciences. I had studied chemistry, physics and maths at school, but not geology. It wasn't a subject which was offered at my school. So in my first year, I enrolled in a joint program which included chemistry, which was my favourite formal subject, and earth sciences. And that gave me a chance to find out about what earth sciences was like to learn as a formal subject. But it still gave me the option to move back to a subject which I knew extremely well, chemistry. I used to indulge my hobby of collecting minerals. So I was a London boy by birth. Myself and the family would come up to Scotland. And I remember when I was about 10 or 11 going to Strontian and the mineral dumps at Strontian and collecting a selection of sparkly minerals, and then bringing them back and going through the process of labelling them up and giving them identifications and that process. And it was that which really got me interested in the subject. So my work has really three types of key activity. The first is my teaching, and it's really, really important for me as somebody who's a practitioner in geology to be able to express what I do and to be able to teach it to the next generation. I also am involved with impact, and what I mean by that is going out into the world and taking the things which I've learned and the things that I understand and applying them to industrial problems. And in that part, what I'm doing is I'm becoming involved in exploration geology. So I'm an exploration geologist many times in the summer. So I'm often flown to different parts of the world where explorers have found rocks of particular interest, and they need a specialist to come in and tell them precisely what those types of rocks are. And over the years I've specialised in Arctic geology. So I'm commonly found in the summers in Greenland, moving around some of the areas in the north of Greenland, looking at potential mineral deposits up there. And the final third of my work is research. So it's actively taking materials which I've collected in the field, studying them using microscopes and chemical isotopic measuring devices. And what I'm trying to do is trying to understand how these rocks came to be the way that we find them. And from that I can reconstruct the geological histories which happened many millions of years ago, which gave rise to these mineral deposits. Well, in my career I have to communicate my results, and that requires me to attend conferences. And the really big conferences can be anywhere in the world. So they might be in America, might be in Asia, for example. Last year I was a visitor for a month in China, in the universities of China, communicating about our work on critical metals. And then also I have to do my field work, and that, as I've said, takes me to the Arctic. So some of the work that I'm involved is understanding not just one area, but understanding a whole region or a whole province. And when I first started as a doctoral student many years ago, I was introduced to a region of southern Greenland known as the Gardar province. And this is a series of old extinct volcanoes, about 15 or 20 of them, which are in a line running across the southernmost part of Greenland. And it's been known that these old volcanoes existed, but I was very fortunate in 2013 to be part of a group of people who visited one of them that's extremely remote, and it's found on the east coast of Greenland in an area where very few people have ever been. So I was able to go to an area and pick up the rocks in the full knowledge that no person had ever been here before, no geologist had ever looked at these rocks, and then I could sample them and provide a geological history of an area, literally from very first principles. And so we were able to describe these rocks for the very first time and then put them in the context of the province as a whole. And that was an extremely wonderful feeling, to think that you were really looking at something that nobody else had ever seen. The research that we do involves exploring for many metals, and people will have heard of metals such as copper and iron and zinc. But what's often not fully appreciated is that we're actually extremely dependent on very rare metals. Things like niobium, tantalum, gadolinium, dysprosium. These are very, very rare elements, but if you pick up a mobile phone, then there are key components within them which are dependent on those metals. And so what I'm involved in is actually exploration for these extremely rare materials, these very rare metals, which are very difficult to find when you're wandering around. It's not like you can find a big lump of iron ore or something like that, which makes iron ore exploration reasonably easy. You have to look for a particular type of rock, and then when you found that particular type of rock, you follow it, and then you come to rocks that potentially have these very rare elements in them. And it's only with the subsequent analysis back in St Andrews that we're able to identify whether or not these are genuinely ores of these very, very rare elements. The challenge is, I can give you a challenge which was a personal challenge for me, coming as I did from a chemistry background and living in London. Geology is a very outdoors subject, and I grew up in the middle of a city, very much with a laboratory background. But I learned very quickly that the best analysts have to go out into the field and collect their own materials, so they know precisely where these rocks come from and the context in which they were sampled. So I had to learn very, very quickly what it was like to be out in the outdoors, in difficult environments, in the rain and the sleet and the snow. But I rose to that challenge, and subsequently I became fascinated by Arctic environments. The pictures of snow and ice and glaciers and mountains absolutely inspired me. So I decided then to try and become a specialist, if you like, in remote field areas. And as a result of that, I actually, if you like, overcompensated for the fact that I didn't have a very strong outdoors background when I first started. And I'm now somebody who works in these very tough and very hard environments. I think that the most important thing is to have a very broad science background. I've always said that geology is like a decathlon. It's made up of lots of different aspects, and no one person is good at all of them. So the best background is the broadest science background across chemistry, physics, maths, biology. I would also say that a geologist has to be someone with a love of the outdoors. There are people with analytical backgrounds in the earth sciences, but actually the vast majority of good sampling is done sometimes in quite remote environments. So it's helpful if you have an interest in the outdoors and actually being involved with the environment and with nature. Okay, when I grew up in London, I became extremely interested in martial arts. So I started taking up some of the martial arts, judo, taekwondo, so on. But I actually became very, very interested in judo. And now I'm actually a judo black belt, and I have quite helped teach the university squad.